Welcome to the Story Behind Scripture Books of the Bible series. Today, an in-depth look at the book of 2nd Chronicles.
So I want you to just imagine for a second standing in the charred rubble of your nation's greatest architectural and spiritual achievement.
Yeah, just absolute devastation.
Right, complete devastation. You've just returned from 70 years as a prisoner of war, basically, and you are standing in the dust of Jerusalem, kicking at these broken stones of a city that, used to be the envy of the ancient world.
And now it's just an ash heap.
Exactly. You're part of this small, impoverished remnant living in a tiny province, completely overshadowed by the massive Persian Empire. And as you look around at this wreckage, this terrifying question just sort of creeps into your mind, like,
Right.
Are we still God's people?
Right. Has the promise expired?
Yeah. Like, how do we even begin to rebuild our identity from this? And that agonizing psychological crisis is exactly where we're starting this deep dive into the source material on 2nd Chronicles.
It really is the perfect place to start. Because, honestly, if you don't understand that rubble, you can possibly understand this text.
No, you totally miss it.
Right. There's this common reflex when people approach 1st and 2nd Chronicles.
Nope.
They often think, well, I just read the books of 1st and 2nd Kings, so this is just a rerun.
Yeah, the classic, I've seen this episode before reaction.
Exactly. They think it's just this dry, repetitive, genealogical recap of the exact same history. But that completely misses the context and, frankly, the brilliance of what is actually happening here.
I think we need a mechanism to understand the difference between Kings and Chronicles, because they do cover a lot of the same historical ground, right? The kings of Judah. So let's think of it like a catastrophic plane crash.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, so when investigators rush a crash site, their primary goal is to find the black box. That flight recorder tells you exactly why the plane went down. It records, every pilot error, every skipped maintenance check, every ignored warning.
Every single thing that went wrong.
Right. That is the book of 1st and 2nd Kings. It was written to a people sitting in the immediate aftermath of the Babylonian exile, and its entire theological purpose is to explain exactly why their nation crashed.
It's the covenant curses being activated, basically.
Exactly. Activated because of their relentless idolatry. So Kings answers the big question, why are we in exile?
Which is, that's a vital question.
Mm.
But Chronicles is not the black box.
No, not at all.
Chronicles is the blueprint. It's the blueprint handed to the survivors who have returned to the wreckage decades later, and they are trying to rebuild the plane.
Which is such a different mindset.
Totally. It's traditionally credited to Ezra, the pre-scribe, compiled around 450 to 430 BC. So the original audience wasn't the generation being deported. It was the post-exilic community.
Right. They already knew why they were being punished.
Exactly. What they desperately needed to know was how to move forward. They are looking at their meager existence, comparing their small, newly built second temple to the legendary glory of Solomon's original temple, and they are deeply, deeply discouraged.
They're probably thinking, is this it? Is this all we get?
Right. They are asking if the Davidic promise of an eternal throne still stands, or if the Babylonians just completely severed that bloodline forever.
So if you're Ezra and you are trying to reconstruct the shattered identity of a nation, you don't just hand them a dry encyclopedia of facts.
Yeah, you can't.
You have to curate the history. You have to view it through a very specific lens to give them hope.
Exactly. And scholars point out that the lens Ezra uses is highly specific. It's priestly, and it is entirely temple-centered.
So the temple is the ultimate measuring stick.
Yes. He evaluates every single king by one vital metric, their relationship to the temple and whether or not they, quote, sought the Lord.
Wow, so all the other stuff doesn't even register.
Not really. Political success, massive economic prosperity, expanding borders, none of that fundamentally matters to the author of Chronicles. A king could be a military genius, but if he neglects the sanctuary, he is an absolute failure in this narrative.
That's fascinating.
It is. The central dynamic that drives the entire book is this covenant reality: seek and find, forsake and be forsaken.
Seek and find, forsake and be forsaken. That is the absolute spine of the history we are looking at today. So To rebuild a nation's identity, you naturally have to start at their pinnacle. You have to remind them of who they were at their absolute best.
Right. Give them the highlight reel.
Exactly. And for ancient Israel, that zenith is King Solomon and the glorious First Temple.
And the narrative of 2 Chronicles opens right there.
Yeah.
But notice the specific mechanism of how it opens. In chapter 1, Solomon is at Gibeon, at the tent of meeting, and God appears to him at night and basically says, ask what I shall give you.
It's the ultimate blank check.
It really is.
Yeah.
Now, if we look at the broader ancient Near Eastern context, when a new king takes the throne and a deity offers a blank check, the standard royal requests are pretty predictable.
Yeah, massive wealth. Right?
Massive wealth, decades of long life, or the brutal subjugation of their geopolitical enemies.
Right. The typical ancient king just wants to be a conquering warlord with a treasury full of gold. But Solomon's request is, it's entirely different. He asks for wisdom and knowledge to govern God's people.
He does.
He essentially admits his own inadequacy to manage this massive covenant community.
And because he aligns his desire with the welfare of the people rather than his own personal aggrandizement, God grants him an unprecedented package.
He gets the whole upgrade.
He really does. He gets the wisdom. But God also says, because this was in your heart, I will also give you riches, possessions, and honor, such as none of the kings had who were before you, and none after you shall have the like.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the massive undertaking detailed in chapters 2 through 5, which is the construction of the temple itself.
And the detail here, it's just staggering.
Oh, it's intense. To a modern reader scanning the text, it can feel like you're reading a contractor's supply manifest.
Yes.
It's just lists of timber, cubits, gold, bronze. But we really have to understand what this meant to the post-exilic reader. This isn't just architecture. It is theology in bronze and gold.
Absolutely.
I mean, Ezra details the massive quantities of materials that King David, Solomon's father, had prepared in advance. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of talents of gold and silver.
It's a completely overwhelming mobilization of national resources.
Yeah.
And we have to look closely at the specific elements Ezra highlights because they aren't just decorative.
Right, everything means something.
Take the two massive bronze pillars standing at the portico, the entrance of the temple. They stand about 27 feet tall. But architecturally, they don't actually hold up the roof.
Wait, really? They're just freestanding?
Yes, they are freestanding.
Wow, they are essentially just monuments then. And they have names too. One is named Jachin, which translates to, he shall establish, or by his counsel. And the other is Boaz, meaning in him is strength.
Right.
So if you are an Israelite walking into the temple courtyard, before you even see the altar or the priests, you are confronted by these twin theological statements. The building isn't standing because of Israel's military might. It is established by God's strength.
Precisely. It's a physical reminder of their reliance. And then you move to what the text calls the Molten Sea.
Oh, this thing is incredible.
It was a massive circular bronze basin used for the priest's ritual washing. It was 10 cubits from brim to brim, so about 15 feet across, and it held roughly 12,000 gallons of water.
That is massive.
And it rested on the backs of 12 bronze oxen, 3 facing each point of the compass.
We have to unpack the cosmology of that because the ancient mind didn't just look at that and see a big bathtub.
No, definitely not.
In ancient Near Eastern literature, the sea often represented chaos, danger, untamed natural forces. Like, think of the Canaanite myth of Baal battling Yam, the god of the sea.
That's a crucial connection to make. By placing this massive sea in the courtyard, resting peacefully on 12 oxen, which represent the 12 tribes or the created order, it is a profound statement.
A statement of control.
Exactly. It says that Yahweh has absolute sovereignty over chaos. The chaotic waters are tamed, contained, and repurposed for purification in God's house.
That is fascinating. So you have the pillars, the sea, and then you move inside past the holy place into the most holy place, the inner sanctum. And Ezra describes these massive cherubim made of olive wood overlaid with gold.
Right.
Now, we really need to correct a modern visual here because when people hear cherubim, they often picture like chubby Renaissance babies with little bird wings.
Cupid, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But that is not what is happening here.
Not at all. In the ancient world, cherubim were terrifying sphinx-like guardian figures. They often combined elements of lions, oxen, eagles, and humans.
Just fierce creatures.
Yes, they represent the fierce, unapproachable holiness of the divine presence. Inside Solomon's temple, these two massive figures stand 15 feet tall. Their wings stretch out, touching the outer walls and touching each other in the center, spanning a total of 30 feet across the room.
It's like a canopy.
Yes, They form a protective canopy right over the Ark of the Covenant.
It is breathtaking imagery. But, this brings up a major critical pushback that we have to address.
Okay, let's hear it.
Anyone who has read the parallel account in 1 Kings knows that Solomon's story actually ends in absolute disaster.
He does.
He marries hundreds of foreign wives. He builds high places for their pagan gods right across the valley from this beautiful temple. And his idolatry directly causes the kingdom to tear itself apart.
Right.
But when you read Chronicles, none of that is there. Ezra completely omits Solomon's downfall. So the obvious question people have is this just blatant historical whitewashing? Like, is Ezra just propagandizing the past?
It's a very common critique, and it's understandable why people ask that. But scholars who analyze the text's specific historiography argue that Ezra is not attempting to deceive anyone.
Because they already knew the history, right?
Exactly. Remember, he fully assumes his post-exilic audience already has the Book of Kings. They know about Solomon's failures. I mean, that's literally why they are sitting in the rubble.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Right. Ezra isn't writing a comprehensive political history. He is writing a targeted theological message. He is deliberately presenting David and Solomon as idealized archetypes.
Okay, but archetypes pointing to what exactly?
Pointing to a future hope. Remember, the original readers were living under Persian rule with no king on the throne. By idealizing Solomon, the author is creating a typological shadow of the ultimate Messianic king.
Ah, so pointing to Jesus.
Yes, in an evangelical framework, Solomon building the house of God is a direct foreshadowing of the greater Son of David building the true eternal temple, which is his church. The physical temple itself, in all its golden glory, is a type that points forward.
It foreshadows Christ's body.
Precisely. So the sins of the historical Solomon are real, and they were dealt with in Kings. But here, the focus is entirely on his role as the anointed temple builder. Ezra is trying to lift the eyes of a broken remnant toward a perfect future hope.
That makes a lot of sense. You don't hand a starving person an autopsy report, You hand them a menu. You show them what is possible.
That's a great way to put it.
And that brings us to the absolute hinge of the entire book. We have this stunning, multi-billion-dollar building. But a building is just an empty shell until it is occupied.
Right.
And the narrative reaches its absolute zenith in chapters 6 through 9, when the creator of the universe actually moves in. Let's talk about the dedication of the temple.
The dedication ceremony is honestly one of the most sensory-rich passages in ancient literature. The priests bring the Ark of the Covenant into the most holy place, sliding it under the wings of those massive golden cherubim we just talked about.
Can you imagine being there?
Right. And as the priests step out of the sanctuary, the Levitical choir and orchestra, we're talking 120 priests blowing trumpets, accompanied by cymbals, harps, and lyres, they begin to sing in perfect unison.
Wow.
They sing, "For he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever."
And right at that exact moment of unified worship, the text says the house of the Lord was filled with a cloud. This is the Shekinah glory, the physical, visible manifestation of God's presence.
And it is overwhelming.
It is so thick, so heavy with divine reality that the priests are literally forced out. They cannot even stand up to do their jobs.
The overwhelming weight of the divine presence basically evicts human agency. It is a terrifying and beautiful moment of validation. God has accepted the house.
And it's in this atmosphere in chapter 6 that Solomon stands before the altar, spreads his hands toward heaven, and prays his great prayer of dedication.
Yes, chapter 6 is monumental.
What strikes me deeply about this prayer is just how prophetic and realistic it is. Solomon has just built the greatest structure on earth, but he isn't under any illusions about human nature.
He knows them too well.
He goes through all these hypothetical scenarios, like if there is famine, if there is a plague, if there is a military defeat. But then he anticipates the ultimate catastrophe of future exile.
Which is exactly what the readers had just survived.
Exactly. He prays that if the people sin and are carried away captive to a foreign land, but then they repent, turn their faces back toward this temple and pray for mercy, that God would hear them from heaven.
He is literally pre-writing the script for the Babylonian exile, hundreds of years before it even happens.
It's wild.
It is. And God's response to that prayer, which comes to Solomon in the night in chapter 7, is the great beating heart of Chronicles. It's a lifeline.
I know this verse. Many listeners will recognize 2 Chronicles 7.12.
Yes, but we really have to hear it with the ears of the post-exilic survivors. God says, "If my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways. Then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land.
Let's actually break down the mechanics of that verse, because it's not just a religious platitude. It outlines a very specific four-step mechanism for restoration.
Yes, it's a progression.
Okay, let's go through it.
First step, humble themselves. This is the recognition of guilt. It's stripping away the pride that says, we didn't deserve this exile.
Which is so hard to do.
Very hard. Second, pray. This is the vocalization of that humility. It's crying out for help. Third, seek my face. Now, this goes beyond just asking for a favor.
How so?
Well, this is desiring the presence and relationship of God himself over just the benefits he provides. It's relational.
Okay, that's a big distinction. And the
Fourth, the crucial pivot, turn from their wicked ways. Repentance isn't just feeling sorry. It is a change of direction, a behavioral realignment with the covenant.
Wow, okay. So humble, pray, seek, turn. And if those four conditions are met, God promises three specific responses. Hear from heaven, forgive their sin, heal their land. Think about the psychology of those returning exiles hearing that. They are standing in a land that is literally scarred by siege warfare, overgrown and desolate. They need healing on an agricultural, economic, and spiritual level.
They need complete restoration.
Yeah. God is telling them that the covenant isn't permanently tied to the bronze and gold of the building. It is a living relationship based on repentance.
That is the crucial shift. The building is magnificent, but the heartbeat of the covenant is the posture of the people. And typologically, this exact pattern, humbling, praying, seeking, turning, finds its ultimate fulfillment in the New Testament.
Right. It's the gospel.
It is the very essence of the gospel's call to repent and believe. The mechanism of grace hasn't changed.
Seek and find. It's the blueprint. And this golden era wraps up in chapter 9 with a really fascinating geopolitical event, the visit of the Queen of Sheba.
Oh, yes.
She controls the lucrative spice trade routes in the southern Arabian Peninsula, which is modern-day Yemen. And she travels 1,200 miles across brutal desert terrain.
A journey that would have taken months.
Months. Just to test Solomon's wisdom and see his glory.
And when she sees the temple, the organization of his officials, the food on his table, the text says there was no more breath in her. She is utterly overwhelmed.
Just completely stunned.
Yeah. She blesses Yahweh for putting Solomon on the throne to execute justice and righteousness.
Which, again, points forward. Centuries later, Jesus references this exact geopolitical visit. He tells the religious leaders of his day that the Queen of the South came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And then Jesus points to himself and says, "And behold, something greater than Solomon is here."
Something greater is here.
Everything in these opening chapters is designed to lift the eyes of the remnant off their present dust and onto the eternal promises of God.
It is masterful theological setup, but unfortunately, the narrative cannot stay on the mountaintop.
No, it can't, because humanity has a tragic flaw. We move from the zenith of the kingdom to a catastrophic fracture in chapters 10 through 12.
It happens so fast.
So fast. The question is, how does a unified, prosperous nation go from the absolute heights of a golden age to a devastating, bloody civil war in a matter of months? And the text tells us it only takes one generation of unchecked arrogance.
Enter Rehoboam, Solomon's son. He inherits the throne, but he also inherits a deeply strained geopolitical and economic situation.
Wait, I thought Solomon's reign was a time of unprecedented wealth and peace. Why was the situation strained?
It was a time of massive wealth, but you have to ask, how was that wealth generated? To build the temple, the palaces, and the massive public works projects, Solomon utilized forced corvée labor from among the people, and he instituted very heavy taxation districts.
Oh, right. Someone had to foot the bill.
Exactly. By the end of his reign, the northern tribes were economically exhausted. They felt alienated from the wealth centralized in Judah. So when Rehoboam goes to Shechem to be made king, the northern tribes approach him, led by a man named Jeroboam, who had actually fled to Egypt during Solomon's reign.
Right. They essentially come to the new CEO and say, "Your father worked us to the bone. Lighten our load, reduce the taxes, and we will serve you."
It is a completely reasonable request. They are just asking for relief.
So Rehoboam asks for 3 days to think about it. He goes to the older men, the seasoned advisors who had counseled his father, and they give him brilliant political advice.
Really found advice.
They say, "If you will be good to this people and please them and speak good words to them, then they will be your servants forever."
It's the mechanism of servant leadership. If a king serves his people, he secures their loyalty.
But Rehoboam ignores them. Instead, he goes to the young men he grew up with, his frat brothers, essentially.
That's a good way to put it.
These are guys who have only ever known opulence and power, who have never built anything themselves. And they tell him to double down, to show absolute dominance.
And he listens to them.
So Rehoboam goes back to the northern tribes and delivers what might be the worst political speech in recorded history. He says, "My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions."
The arrogance is just astounding. A scorpion in this context likely referred to a specific type of brutal whip embedded with sharp metal or glass. So he is actively promising tyranny.
It reminds me of a stress test on a poorly engineered bridge. The people are telling him, look, we are at our structural weight limit, we are going to crack. And instead of removing the load, he drives 10 more freight trucks onto the bridge just to prove he's in charge.
And the result is an immediate catastrophic fracture.
Completely shattered.
The 10 northern tribes instantly secede. They declare independence, shouting, "What portion have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to your tents, O Israel."
Wow.
They make Jeroboam their king. And just like that, the united monarchy is dead. The nation is ripped into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah.
But this is where the specific lens of Chronicles becomes so apparent. In the Book of Kings, the author constantly cuts back and forth between the north and the south, comparing the kings, tracking the prophets Elijah and Elisha up north.
Right, it's a dual narrative.
But in Chronicles, Ezra almost entirely ignores the northern kingdom. The camera pans south to Jerusalem and basically stays there for the rest of the book. Why completely ignore 10 out of the 12 tribes?
It goes right back to the chronicler's primary metric, the sanctuary and the Davidic promise. Why does the south matter exclusively? Because the temple is in Jerusalem and the bloodline of David is in Jerusalem.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
And almost immediately after the split, Jeroboam, the king of the north, realizes that if his new northern subjects keep traveling south to Jerusalem for the annual temple festivals, their hearts will eventually return to the Davidic king.
Right, they'll miss the old days.
Exactly. So he institutes a rival religion. He sets up 2 golden calves, one at Dan in the far north and one at Bethel near the southern border, and says, "Here are your gods, O Israel." And he appoints non-Levitical priests.
It's basically an ancient mechanism of border control disguised as theology. He is weaponizing religion to maintain geopolitical sovereignty.
Exactly. And from Ezra's perspective, the northern kingdom has completely opted out of the covenant blueprint. They have forsaken the true worship of Yahweh. Therefore, their history is no longer the focus of God's redemptive narrative.
They're written out of the story.
Basically, yes. However, Ezra includes one vital detail about this split that the Book of Kings actually leaves out, and it's deeply relevant to his post-exilic audience.
The migration of the Levites?
Yes. When Jeroboam sets up his false religion, the faithful priests and Levites living in the northern territories face a profound crisis of conscience. And the text says they actually abandoned their pastoral lands and their properties, packed up, and migrated south to Judah.
They became religious refugees.
They did. They refused to participate in state-sponsored idolatry. And the text notes that anyone from the other tribes who, quote, set their hearts to seek the Lord, followed them south.
That is massive. It creates a brain drain and a spiritual drain on the north, but it hugely strengthens Judah. And it makes a really powerful theological statement. True Israel is not defined by geographic borders or tribal affiliation. It is defined by fidelity to the temple and a heart that seeks God.
Exactly. You belong to the covenant if you seek the Lord.
Which perfectly transitions into the next 300 years of history, covered in chapters 13 through 32. With the kingdom divided, Chronicles tracks the remaining kings of Judah. And what emerges is an incredibly clear, repeating rhythm.
Like a pendulum.
Yes, a pendulum of faithfulness, falling, humbling, and restoration. It's the ultimate seek the Lord test applied to real-world geopolitics. Let's look at King Asa in chapter 14.
Okay, let's dive into Asa.
Asa starts out incredibly strong. He clears out foreign altars and commands Judah to seek the Lord. But then he faces an existential threat. A man named Zerah the Cushite, likely an Ethiopian or Egyptian military commander, invades Judah with an army of 1,000,000 men and 300 chariots.
1,000,000 men. Asa is vastly, vastly outnumbered.
Insurmountable odds.
The battle lines are drawn in the valley of Zephathah, in the Shephelah, the foothills leading up to Jerusalem. And here Asa demonstrates the perfect reliance that Chronicles wants to highlight. He doesn't negotiate a surrender, he prays.
And his prayer is amazing.
He says, "O Lord, there is none like you to help between the mighty and the weak. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you, and in your name we have come against this multitude."
It's an admission of total inadequacy, and God honors that. The text says God defeated the Ethiopians before Asa. It's a massive victory. Seek and find.
But the tragedy of Asa is the pivot in his later years.
The pendulum swings.
It does. Decades later, Baasha, the king of the north, comes down and starts fortifying a town called Ramah, which is just 5 miles north of Jerusalem. It's essentially an economic blockade, cutting off trade routes into Judah.
And what does Asa do? Instead of relying on God like he did with the million-man army, he completely panics. He goes into the temple, the very sanctuary he is supposed to protect, and strips the silver and gold from its treasuries.
A total violation.
Yeah, and he sends it north to Ben-Hadad, the pagan king of Syria, to buy a military alliance. He's effectively saying, break your treaty with Baasha and attack him from the rear so he leaves me alone.
And geopolitically, I mean, it works. Baasha abandons Ramah.
Yeah.
But theologically, it is a disaster.
God is not happy.
No. A prophet named Hanani comes to Asa and rebukes him. He says, "Because you relied on the king of Syria and did not rely on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Syria has escaped you."
He reminds him of his past victory, right?
Yes. He reminds Asa of the Ethiopian army, saying, "For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to give strong support to those whose heart is blameless toward him."
And Asa is so infuriated by this prophetic rebuke that he throws Hanani in prison. He just becomes a tyrant. And then there's this ultimate tragic irony. In his old age, Asa gets a severe disease in his feet.
Oh, right.
And Ezra explicitly notes, yet even in his disease, he did not seek the Lord, but sought help from physicians.
Now, to be clear, the text isn't anti-medicine.
Right. It's not saying doctors are bad.
Exactly. In the ancient Near East, physicians were often associated with magical incantations and foreign deities. The point here is that Asa's heart had grown so hard that even in physical agony, his reflex was no longer to look to God.
He died having forsaken the very reliance that defined his early reign. Forsake and be forsaken.
Such a tragic end.
Okay, let's look at his son, Jehoshaphat. This is honestly one of the most remarkable military narratives in ancient history. Judah is invaded by a massive coalition, army Moabites, Ammonites, and men from Mount Seir.
They are coming up from the southeast, near the Dead Sea.
The intelligence report reaches Jerusalem. A great multitude is coming against you.
And Jehoshaphat is terrified.
Rightfully so.
But look at his mechanism of response. He doesn't immediately marshal the troops. He declares a national fast. He gathers the entire nation in the courtyard of the new temple. Men, women, and children are standing there waiting.
And Jehoshaphat stands up and prays a prayer that is the absolute antithesis of typical royal propaganda. I mean, kings usually project unbreakable strength, right? But Jehoshaphat publicly confesses raw vulnerability.
He does.
He recounts God's history with Israel, and then he ends with this profound admission. "O our God, will you not execute judgment on them? For we are powerless against this great horde that is coming against us. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you."
We do not know what to do.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate expression of humbling oneself under 2 Chronicles 7.1.
Yeah, step one right there.
And the divine response is immediate. The Spirit of the Lord falls upon Jehoshaphat, a Levite, in the middle of the assembly. He speaks prophetically to the king and the crowd. "Do not be afraid, and do not be dismayed at this great horde, for the battle is not yours, but God's."
Wow.
He tells them they won't even need to fight. They just need to stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord.
The psychology of what happens next is just wild. The next morning, the army marches out into the wilderness of Tekoa. But Jehoshaphat does something completely contrary to military doctrine.
It's completely backwards.
He puts the temple choir at the front of the army.
He weaponizes worship.
Exactly. They march out singing, "Give thanks to the Lord, for his steadfast love endures forever." And as they begin to sing and praise, God sets an ambush. The coalition forces turn on each other in complete confusion.
So by the time Judah arrives at the watchtower in the wilderness, they look out over the valley, and it's just a field of dead bodies.
They don't even have to draw a single sword. They just spend 3 days gathering the spoil. Seek and find. Total reliance yields total deliverance.
But again, the pendulum continues to swing. We have to look at the tragic arc of King Joash, because it involves a horrific violation of the sanctuary itself.
His story is so intense.
Joash's story starts with incredible drama. His grandmother, Athaliah, usurps the throne and murders all the royal heirs.
Her own grandchildren.
Yes. But infant Joash is hidden by his aunt and the high priest, Jehoiada. For 6 years, the true Davidic king is hidden inside the temple while a usurper rules the land.
So the temple literally preserves the Messianic bloodline.
Yes, exactly. And when Joash is 7, Joash orchestrates a brilliant coup. He executes Athaliah and crowns the boy.
What a moment.
And under Jehoiada's guidance, Joash initiates a massive crowdfunding campaign, basically placing a chest at the temple gate to repair the sanctuary. As long as Jehoiada the high priest is alive to mentor him, Joash seeks the Lord.
But then Jehoiada dies at the ripe old age of 130.
And immediately, Joash's true character is exposed.
Because he didn't actually have his own faith, right?
Right, he lacked an internal compass. He was just drafting off the high priest's faith. He listens to the princes of Judah, who convince him to abandon the house of God and serve idols.
And God sends prophets to warn them, but they refuse to listen. Finally, the Spirit of God clothes Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, the very priest who saved Joash's life.
The irony is awful.
It is. Zechariah stands above the people in the temple courtyard and delivers a blistering verdict. Why do you break the commandments of the Lord so that you cannot prosper? Because you have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you.
And Joash's reaction is unspeakably brutal. This king, who grew up playing in the shadows of the sanctuary, who owed his life to Zechariah's family, orders the people to stone Zechariah to death.
It's sickening.
And they do it right there,
Yeah.
the courtyard of the house of the Lord. They murder a priest in the sanctuary. The spatial violation is horrifying. The blood of the prophet literally stains the pavement of the temple.
It is the ultimate betrayal of the covenant. And centuries later, Jesus actually validates this specific historical horror.
He does, yeah.
In Matthew 23, when Jesus is rebuking the religious leaders of his day for their hypocrisy, he references the righteous blood shed on earth, specifically naming Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar.
The judgment on Joash is swift. He is assassinated by his own servants on his bed. The sanctuary cannot be mocked.
No, it cannot.
And we see that principle play out again in the life of King Uzziah. Uzziah is a marvel of ancient engineering and agriculture. He builds towers, invents siege engines to shoot arrows and great stones, and has these massive farms.
He was incredibly successful.
The text says his fame spread far, for he was marvelously helped till he was strong.
Till he was strong. That is always the turning point.
2 Chronicles 6 says, but when he was strong, he grew proud to his destruction. Uzziah decides that being the absolute monarch is not enough. He wants spiritual authority too.
Think of it like a massive constitutional crisis. In ancient Israel, there was a strict separation of powers between the kingship and the priesthood. The king led the nation, but only the consecrated descendants of Aaron were permitted to approach the inner altar to burn incense.
It was a mechanism to prevent absolute, unchecked dictatorial power.
Right. But Uzziah walks right into the holy place with a censer in his hand.
He is usurping the holiness of God. The high priest Azariah and 80 courageous priests follow him in, risking their lives, and confront the most powerful man in the region. They tell him to leave the sanctuary.
I can't imagine the tension in that room.
Uzziah becomes enraged. He's standing there screaming at the priest, holding the censer.
And while he is raging right there in the holy place, leprosy breaks out on his forehead. God strikes him instantly.
The priests don't even have to push him out. He rushes at himself in absolute terror.
He spends the rest of his life living in a separate house as a leper, completely cut off from the house of the Lord. His son has to govern the people. You just cannot breach the boundaries God has established.
Which brings us to the starkest contrast in the entire book, the reigns of Ahaz and his son Hezekiah. If you want to understand the theology of Chronicles, look at these two kings.
Ahaz is unspeakably wicked.
He is. Facing military pressure from Syria and Israel, he submits to the Assyrian Empire for protection. He goes to Damascus, sees an Assyrian altar, and decides to completely redesign the worship in Jerusalem.
But he goes further than anyone before him. He gathers the sacred vessels of the temple, cuts them into pieces, and literally shuts the doors of the house of the Lord.
He boards up the temple.
He just boards it up. He sets up pagan altars on every street corner in Jerusalem. It is the absolute nadir of spiritual darkness. The heartbeat of the nation is flatlining.
But then Ahaz dies, and his son Hezekiah takes the throne. And what is the very first act of Hezekiah's administration in the first month of his first year?
He goes straight to the temple.
He goes to the temple, opens the doors, and repairs them.
He brings the priests and Levites back, tells them to consecrate themselves, and they spend 16 days physically hauling the filth and debris out of the sanctuary that his father had accumulated.
It was a massive cleanup project.
And Hezekiah initiates something beautiful. He doesn't just restore worship for Judah. He sends couriers with letters all the way up into the fractured northern territories of Ephraim and Manasseh.
Keep in mind, the north had already fallen to the Assyrians by this point. Only a scattered remnant remained. Hezekiah writes to them, "O people of Israel, return to the Lord. Do not be like your fathers and your brothers who were faithless to the Lord. Do not now be stiff-necked, but yield yourselves to the Lord and come to his sanctuary."
He invites them to the Passover. And while some in the north mock the couriers, many humble themselves and travel south. It is an unprecedented, joyous reunion. The text says there was great joy in Jerusalem, for since the time of Solomon there had been nothing like this.
And this spiritual renewal prepares them for a massive geopolitical crisis. Sennacherib, the terrifying king of Assyria, invades Judah. He systematically destroys all the fortified cities. We literally have the Lahash reliefs in the British Museum today showing the brutal Assyrian siege of Judah.
Yeah, the visual evidence is stunning.
Finally, Sennacherib surrounds Jerusalem. His commander stands outside the walls and yells propaganda in Hebrew, mocking Hezekiah and mocking Yahweh, basically saying no god of any nation has been able to deliver them from the Assyrian war machine.
The psychological terror of an ancient siege is just unimaginable. Starvation, disease, the threat of being flayed alive by the Assyrians. Sennacherib sends Hezekiah a letter full of these blasphemous threats.
So what does Hezekiah do?
His mechanism of defense is amazing. He takes the letter, walks directly into the open doors of the temple, and physically spreads the letter out before the Lord. He basically says, look at what they are saying about you. He prays for deliverance so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that Yahweh is God.
And God responds. Without Hezekiah lifting a single weapon, God sends an angel who annihilates the mighty men and commanders in the Assyrian camp.
Unbelievable.
Sennacherib returns to Nineveh in disgrace and is eventually assassinated by his own sons. Because Hezekiah sought the Lord, the nation was saved.
Okay, if the book ended right there with Hezekiah's triumph, it would be a perfect Hollywood ending. The temple is cleansed, the people are unified, the ultimate enemy is miraculously destroyed, the credits roll.
But history doesn't stop.
It doesn't, and that brings us to the most shocking turn of events in the entire narrative, the plot twist of grace, covering chapters 33 through 36. The throne passes to Hezekiah's 12-year-old son, Manasseh. And Manasseh is, without exaggeration, the absolute worst king in the history of Judah.
He is a nightmare. He reigns for 55 years, undoing literally everything his father achieved.
Let's truly understand the horror of Manasseh's reign. He rebuilds the pagan high places. He erects altars to Baal. He worships the host of heaven, the stars and planets. He practices divination and witchcraft.
It gets even darker.
Much darker. In the valley of Hinnom, just outside the city walls, he literally burns his own sons as human sacrifices to foreign gods.
It's horrifying.
He sheds so much innocent blood that it fills the streets of Jerusalem. And the ultimate desecration, he takes a carved idol and a Asherah pole and sets it up inside the most holy place of God's temple.
He brings the abomination into the very throne room of Yahweh.
The text explicitly states that Manasseh seduced Judah to do more evil than the pagan nations whom the Lord had destroyed before the people of Israel.
Because of this horrific breach of covenant, God acts. He brings the commanders of the Assyrian army against Manasseh. And the historical details here match Assyrian annals perfectly.
They really do.
The Assyrians capture Manasseh, put literal hooks in his nose or jaw, bind him in heavy bronze chains, and drag him away to the dungeons of Babylon.
Now, in the book of 2 Kings, that is basically the end of Manasseh's theological contribution. He is the point of no return. He is the reason Judah is ultimately doomed.
Right.
But here in Chronicles, Ezra includes a detail that changes the entire trajectory of the book. In the absolute darkness of that Babylonian dungeon, in physical agony and exile, the most wicked man in history breaks.
2 Chronicles 33:12 is such a monumental verse. It says, "And when he was in distress, he entreated the favor of the Lord his God, and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers. He prayed to him."
Stop and think about the audacity of that. The man who burned his own children, who mocked God's prophets, who defiled the temple, is sitting in a dungeon asking for a second chance.
Yeah.
If you are a post-exilic Jew reading this, you are thinking, there is absolutely no way God listens to this monster.
But look at the mechanism of grace. The text says, "And God was moved by his entreaty and heard his plea and brought him again to Jerusalem into his kingdom." God actually restores him.
Wow.
And then we get this profound summary statement. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord was God.
It is the most shocking plot twist in the Old Testament. Why does Ezra include this? Because it is the ultimate proof of concept for 2 Chronicles 7.14. If my people humble themselves and pray, I will forgive. If that works for Manasseh, the chief of sinners, then it works for anybody.
It is a radical message for the post-exilic community. I mean, they felt the crushing weight of their ancestors' sins. They felt unworthy.
Right, they felt like damaged goods.
Ezra is telling them, no one is beyond the reach of God's mercy if they genuinely repent. Typologically, this points straight to the radical grace of the New Testament. It is the Apostle Paul's testimony, the murderer of Christians who receives mercy to demonstrate God's perfect patience.
Manasseh spends his final years trying to undo the damage, tearing the idols out of the temple. Then eventually we get to his grandson, Josiah. Josiah takes the throne at 8 years old, and he becomes the final great reformer of Judah.
In his 18th year, while funding repairs for the temple, the high priest Hezekiah makes a massive discovery in the rubble. He finds the lost book of the law of the Lord given through Moses, which was likely the book of Deuteronomy.
Just imagine losing your own foundational constitution.
Right. They bring the scroll to Josiah and read it to him. And when this young king hears the covenant curses, he realizes how far they have fallen. He literally tears his clothes in grief.
He doesn't make excuses.
No. He gathers the entire nation, reads the book to them, and makes a covenant to keep God's commandments with all his heart.
He executes a sweeping, violent purge of idolatry throughout the land, grinding altars to dust, and he institutes a Passover that is even greater than Hezekiah's.
But tragically, Josiah's life ends in unnecessary geopolitical conflict. In 609 BC, Pharaoh Necho of Egypt is marching his army north to assist the collapsing Assyrian Empire against the rising power of Babylon. Josiah rides out to intercept him in Megiddo.
Necho actually sends envoys saying, I have no quarrel with you today. God has told me to hurry. Stop opposing God who is with me, or he will destroy you.
But Josiah refuses to listen. He disguises himself, goes into battle, and is mortally wounded by archers. He is brought back to Jerusalem and dies, and the prophet Jeremiah leads the lamentations for him.
With Josiah's death, the final structural supports of the nation just give way. Chapter 36 covers the rapid, disastrous collapse of Judah. We get 4 final kings in rapid succession: Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah.
They are essentially puppet kings, bouncing between Egyptian and Babylonian control.
And their spiritual condition is absolute rebellion. The text says they stiffened their necks and hardened their hearts against turning to the Lord. The priests and the people polluted the house of the Lord.
God, in his compassion, keeps sending messengers and prophets to warn them, because he had pity on his people and his dwelling place.
But they kept mocking the messengers, despising his words, and scoffing at his prophets.
Until the text says, the wrath of the Lord rose against his people until there was no remedy. The Babylonian war machine, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, arrives.
And this is the devastation we talked about at the beginning. The Babylonians slaughter the young men with the sword right in the sanctuary. They show no compassion to young or old. They strip the temple of all its remaining gold and vessels.
And then the unthinkable happens.
Yeah.
They set fire to the house of God. They break down the massive walls of Jerusalem, burn all its palaces, and destroy everything of value. The survivors are bound in chains and march 700 miles across the desert to Babylon to become servants. The promised land is empty. The temple is a smoking crater. The Davidic throne is vacant.
To the human eye, it looks like the covenant is dead. It looks like the end of the story.
It really does.
Which brings us to our closing movement. The survivors are sitting in the rubble, but as we see in the final verses of this book, God's promises cannot be killed by Babylonian swords.
Ezra inserts a fascinating theological calculation regarding the exile. He notes in chapter 36 that the land lay desolate, quote, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah until the land had enjoyed its Sabbaths. He is pulling a mechanism directly from the book of Leviticus. God had commanded Israel to give the agricultural land a rest, a Sabbath year, every 7 years. For centuries, Israel had greedily ignored this command, working the land relentlessly.
So God essentially says, if you won't give the land its mandated rest, I will evict you, and the land will take its rest while you are gone.
The 70-year exile was a forced Sabbath. But the profound hope buried in that mathematical calculation is that a 70-year punishment has an expiration date. It was discipline, not permanent destruction.
That is so encouraging. And then we reach the final verses of the book. Because Chronicles is placed last in the traditional Jewish ordering of the scriptures, these are actually the final verses of the entire Hebrew Bible. The 70 years are up. The geopolitical landscape has shifted. Babylon has fallen to the Persian Empire. It is 539 BC.
And the text says the Lord stirred up the spirit of a pagan Persian king named Cyrus.
Cyrus issues a written decree throughout his entire empire. He says, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah."
Notice the reversal there. It's not a decree of deportation. It's a decree of repatriation. And Cyrus issues the ultimate invitation to the captive Jews, "Whoever is among you, of all his people, may the Lord his God be with him. Let him go up."
Let him go up. Chronicles doesn't end with the black box of judgment. It ends with an open door. It is an invitation to return to the blueprint, to rebuild the altar, to re-enter the covenant. It proves that the Davidic line survived the fires of the exile.
And that preservation is the theological bridge right into the New Testament. Because that unbroken bloodline, carefully preserved through the ruins of Jerusalem and the dungeons of Babylon, leads straight through the centuries to a manger in Bethlehem. It leads directly to the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, Jesus Christ.
The physical second temple that those returning exiles went back to build would eventually be destroyed again by the Romans in 70 AD. It was always temporary. But the true temple, the physical body of Jesus Christ, was torn down on the cross and raised up on the third day, never to be destroyed again.
If we look at the typology, the whole point of Chronicles wasn't just to make the returning remnant fall in love with a building made of stone and cedar. It was to prepare their hearts for a person.
So bringing this ancient history directly into your life right now, the New Testament writers tell us that through Christ, the Holy Spirit now dwells within the believer. You are the temple. You are the sanctuary.
The location of God's presence has shifted from a building in Jerusalem to the human heart.
Right. So the metric that Ezra used to measure every ancient king is the exact same metric applied to us today. Are you seeking the Lord?
Which leaves us with a really provocative mechanism to evaluate our own lives. If your heart is the sanctuary, what is its current condition? Are the doors open, like in the days of Hezekiah, swept clean and ready for worship? Or, in the busyness and the compromises of life, have you boarded up the doors like Ahaz?
Have you brought foreign idols into the most holy place? It's a heavy question. But remember the plot twist of Manasseh. It does not matter how far you have fallen or what kind of rubble you are currently sitting in. The mechanism of 2 Chronicles 7.14 is still active. If you humble yourself, pray, seek his face, and turn, God will hear from heaven. The door is open. Let him go up. Something to mull over as you go about your day. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you for joining us on the story behind Scripture. Join us next week on the Books of the Bible series for a deep dive into the book of Ezra.